What if I told you that the nicest person you know could be the most dangerous? Not dangerous in a violent way, but dangerous to every manipulator, narcissist, and energy vampire who's been feeding off their kindness for years. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, documented something so shocking about empaths that it kept him awake at night. He discovered that when an empath finally snaps, they don't break down, they level up in the most terrifying way possible. Picture this: you're the office doormat, the family peacekeeper, the friend who always listens but never speaks up. Everyone thinks they know you, gentle, forgiving, infinitely patient. But what they don't realize is that you've been taking mental notes. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every time someone took advantage of your kindness. You've been building a psychological profile so detailed it would make the FBI jealous. Jung studied dozens of these transformations in 1950s America, and what he found changes everything we thought we knew about sensitive people. These weren't victims having breakdowns, they were sleeping giants having awakenings, and once awakened, they became absolutely unstoppable. This is their story, and maybe yours too. The American empath epidemic. In the land of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and fake it till you make it, empaths have become America's invisible emotional workforce. We're the ones absorbing everyone else's drama at Thanksgiving dinner, smoothing over workplace conflicts, and staying up until 3 a.m. talking friends through their relationship disasters. Sound familiar? Jung's research in post-war America revealed something disturbing. Empaths weren't just naturally caring people. They were psychological sponges who'd been systematically trained to absorb other people's emotional garbage. Think about it. American culture celebrates the strong, silent type while shaming anyone who's too emotional or too sensitive. We've created a society where empaths learn to apologize for existing. But here's where Jung's findings get wild. He discovered that American empaths weren't actually weaker than other people. They were processing emotional data at superhuman levels. While everyone else was scrolling through social media mindlessly, empaths were unconsciously cataloging micro-expressions, voice tonalities, and behavioral patterns with the precision of a CIA operative. The American dream tells us that if we work hard and stay positive, everything will work out. For empaths, this translated into a toxic belief: if I just love them harder, give more, sacrifice more, they'll change. Jung watched patient after patient destroy themselves, trying to fix people who had no intention of being fixed. They were playing a rigged game, thinking their kindness was currency, when it was actually being treated as an all-you-can-eat buffet. Jung documented case after case of American empaths who came to a Zurich clinic carrying the same wounds. The suburban mum whose husband cheated for years while she blamed herself for not being enough. The corporate executive who'd been gaslighted by colleagues so thoroughly he questioned his own intelligence. The small-town daughter who'd spent decades managing her alcoholic father's rage while her siblings lived their lives freely. What made these cases uniquely American was the added layer of individualistic pressure. In other cultures, community support systems might catch these patterns earlier, but American empaths were expected to handle everything alone, to be grateful for toxic crumbs, and to never, ever make waves. They were drowning in emotional labor, while being told they were lucky to be needed. The breaking point always came the same way, not through gradual realization, but through a single moment of devastating clarity. Jung called it the American awakening, that split second when an empath realizes they've been playing by rules that were designed to destroy them. It usually happened after discovering a betrayal so profound it shattered their carefully constructed worldview. The suburban mum finds the affair evidence and realizes she ignored red flags for months. The executive discovers his mentor has been stealing his ideas while systematically undermining his confidence. The small-town daughter watches her father treat a stranger with more respect than he's ever shown her. These weren't random betrayals. They were the final pieces of a puzzle these empaths had been unconsciously solving for years. Jung noticed something fascinating about American empaths specifically. Their transformation wasn't just personal, it was revolutionary. In a culture built on hierarchies and power dynamics, an awakened empath becomes a system disruptor. They can no longer be controlled by guilt, manipulation, or social pressure. They start asking dangerous questions like, why am I responsible for everyone else's emotions? And what would happen if I stopped apologizing for existing? The American empath's journey from doormat to force of nature isn't just a personal transformation, It's a cultural rebellion against a system that profits from their emotional labor. Jung realized he wasn't just treating individuals. He was documenting the birth of a new kind of American, one who could feel everything without being destroyed by it. The moment everything changes, Jung identified the exact moment when American empaths stop being victims and start being victorious. It's not gradual, it's not gentle. It's like watching Clark Kent realize he's Superman, except instead of flying, they develop the superpower of psychological immunity. The trigger is always betrayal. But not just any betrayal. It's betrayal by the one person the empath trusted, completely, usually the person they've been protecting, supporting, and enabling for years. The husband who cheats after you've been the perfect wife. The best friend who spreads your secrets after you've kept all of theirs. The boss who takes credit for your work after you've made them look good for months. But here's what made Jung's blood run cold. The empath's reaction. Instead of the expected emotional meltdown, something else happens. A terrifying calm descends. It's the calm of someone who's just solved a puzzle they didn't know they were working on. Every red flag they ignored. Every gut feeling they dismissed. Every time they thought something's off, but I'm probably just being paranoid. It all clicks into place with devastating clarity. Jung documented this transformation across dozens of cases, and the pattern was always identical. The moment of betrayal doesn't break the empath, it wakes them up. Suddenly, they are not seeing through the lens of love and hope anymore. They're seeing through the lens of data and patterns, and what they see is terrifying in its accuracy. Remember Sarah from Jung's files, the 35-year-old teacher who discovered her husband's 3-year affair. Instead of crying or screaming, she became unnaturally analytical. She asked him questions, with the precision of a detective. When you said you were working late on Thursdays, were you with her? How many of our friends knew? Did you use our credit card for the hotel? Her husband expected tears and drama. What he got was an interrogation that would make a prosecutor jealous. This is where Jung's findings get really disturbing. Sarah didn't just discover the affair, she realized she'd unconsciously documented every lie, every inconsistency, every moment when her gut had tried to warn her. Her empath brain had been running background surveillance for years, cataloging evidence she'd consciously chosen to ignore. The betrayal didn't reveal new information. It gave her permission to trust information she'd been collecting all along. Transformation happens in real time, and it's visible to everyone around them. Family members who've walked all over the empath for years suddenly find themselves dealing with someone completely different. The people-pleasing stops. The apologizing ends. The endless second chances dry up. It's like watching someone flip a switch from victim mode to warrior mode in a single conversation. Jung observed that American empaths in particular experienced this transformation with devastating efficiency, growing up in a culture that celebrates individual strength while punishing emotional expression. They've been unconsciously preparing for this moment their entire lives. When they finally give themselves permission to use their analytical abilities, without the filter of false hope, they become unstoppable. The most chilling part, they don't become cruel or vindictive. They become precise. Instead of emotional outbursts, they deliver surgical strikes of truth. They don't attack their betrayers. They simply hold up a mirror and force them to see themselves clearly. The result is often more devastating than any screaming match because it's impossible to argue with facts. Delivered calmly. This is the moment Jung called the birth of the awakened empath. When someone finally integrates their emotional intelligence with their analytical capabilities, they don't lose their ability to feel. They gain the wisdom to choose what deserves their emotional energy. And that choice, Jung realized, makes them incredibly dangerous to anyone who's been exploiting their kindness. The psychological superpower unleashed. Once an American empath awakens, they develop what Jung called predator recognition software, the ability to identify manipulative people within minutes of meeting them. It's like they suddenly have X-ray vision for psychological games, and they can see right through the masks people wear. Jung documented case after case of awakened empaths who became absolutely unmanipulatable. They'd walk into rooms full of people and immediately know who the energy vampires were, who had hidden agendas, and who was genuine. It wasn't magic or psychic ability, it was pattern recognition at a superhuman level. Take Michael from Jung's files, a 42-year-old marketing director who'd been systematically undermined by his boss for 3 years. After his awakening moment, discovering his boss had been taking credit for his campaigns, while sabotaging his promotion prospects, Michael developed what Jung called corporate immunity. He could read office politics like a chess grandmaster, predicting people's moves several steps ahead. Within 6 months of his transformation, Michael had completely restructured his professional relationships. He documented every interaction, built alliances strategically, and positioned himself so that his boss's manipulative tactics backfired spectacularly. When his boss tried the usual gaslighting techniques, Michael responded with specific examples, dates, and witnesses. The boss, suddenly unable to operate his usual psychological games, began avoiding Michael entirely. This is what Jung found most disturbing about awakened empaths. They don't just develop immunity to manipulation, they become capable of using their emotional intelligence as a strategic weapon. They understand human psychology at such a deep level that they could devastate their enemies if they chose to. The terrifying part, they almost never choose to. Jung spent years following these transformed empaths, expecting to see them become vengeful or cruel. Instead, he discovered something that challenged everything he thought he knew about human nature. These individuals became what he called benevolent predators, people with the capability to destroy others, who chose instead to simply remove toxic people from their lives and move on. The American empaths in Jung's study showed a particular pattern of strategic non-engagement. Instead of fighting their former abusers, they'd quietly restructure their lives to make manipulation impossible. They'd sell houses, change jobs, and relocate across the country with calculated precision. Their former tormentors would be left wondering what happened, dealing with the sudden absence of their emotional supply source. But the real superpower wasn't their ability to avoid manipulation. It was their ability to help other empaths transform. Jung observed that awakened empaths became like psychological vaccination stations, teaching other sensitive people how to recognize and resist manipulation. They'd share their stories not for sympathy, but as educational tools. The ripple effects were extraordinary. One awakened empath in Jung's study, a 38-year-old nurse named Patricia, transformed not just her own life, but her entire family system. After leaving her abusive marriage, she helped her sister recognize similar patterns in her relationship, supported her elderly mother in setting boundaries with an exploitative sibling, and even guided her teenage daughter in identifying manipulative friends. Jung realized these empaths hadn't just healed themselves, they'd become immune system boosters for everyone around them. They were creating what he called psychological herd immunity against manipulation and abuse. The most fascinating discovery was how their presence affected manipulative people. Jung documented multiple cases where narcissists and psychopaths would become visibly uncomfortable around awakened empaths. They couldn't explain why, but they felt exposed and transparent in ways that made them want to flee. It was as if the empaths were unconsciously broadcasting, "I can see through you," at a frequency only predators could detect. These transformed empaths became living proof that sensitivity isn't weakness, it's weaponized awareness, waiting for conscious activation. The ripple effect that changes everything. When an American empath transforms, they don't just change their own life, they become a catalyst that forces everyone around them to evolve or reveal their true nature. Jung documented this phenomenon across dozens of cases, calling it the authenticity earthquake that shakes every relationship system the empath has been part of. That the transformation starts at home, where the effects are most dramatic. Family members who've relied on the empath as their emotional dumping ground suddenly find themselves without a receptacle for their dysfunction. The alcoholic father can no longer use his empath daughter as a verbal punching bag because she simply stops engaging with his rage. The manipulative mother can no longer guilt-trip her empath son into managing her emotions because he's developed immunity to emotional blackmail. Jung observed that these family system changes happen with stunning speed. Within weeks of an empath's transformation, dysfunction that's been hidden for decades gets exposed. The family scapegoat role becomes vacant, and suddenly everyone has to face their own issues instead of projecting them onto the empath. Some family members rise to the occasion and become healthier. Others reveal themselves to be so invested in dysfunction that they can't handle the empath's newfound boundaries. The workplace effects are equally dramatic. Jung documented cases where awakened empaths single-handedly transformed toxic office cultures simply by refusing to participate in them. They stopped covering for incompetent colleagues, quit absorbing blame for other people's mistakes, and began documenting everything with forensic precision. The result? manipulative managers lost their scapegoats, and entire departments had to face accountability for the first time in years. One of Jung's most fascinating cases involved Rebecca, a 29-year-old administrative assistant who worked for a law firm. After her awakening triggered by discovering her boss had been lying to clients and blaming her for the firm's mistakes, Rebecca implemented what Jung called strategic transparency. She started documenting every interaction, copying relevant parties on important emails, and refusing to participate in covering up her boss's incompetence. Within 3 months, the managing partners discovered the pattern of lies and client complaints that Rebecca's boss had been hiding. But instead of firing Rebecca as her boss expected, they promoted her and removed the toxic manager. Rebecca's refusal to enable dysfunction had actually saved the firm from a potential malpractice suit. This is what Jung found most revolutionary about awakened American empaths. They become organizational healers by refusing to enable organizational sickness. In a culture where team players are expected to absorb toxicity for the greater good, the awakened empath becomes a system disruptor who forces healthier dynamics through their mere presence. The social effects extend far beyond family and work. Jung observed that awakened empaths become magnets for authentic people while unconsciously repelling manipulators. Their friend groups naturally evolve as energy vampires find themselves unable to feed and drift away. While genuine people feel safe opening up for the first time, the dating world transforms completely. Awakened empaths develop what Jung called instant asshole detection, the ability to spot red flags within minutes of meeting someone. They become incredibly selective about romantic partners, no longer accepting love bombing, future faking, or other manipulation tactics that would have fooled them in their pre-awakened state. Jung documented multiple cases of awakened empaths who became relationship role models for their communities. Their healthy partnerships stood in stark contrast to the dysfunction around them, inspiring others to raise their standards and seek authentic connections. Perhaps most importantly, awakened empaths become inadvertent teachers. Their transformation stories spread through social networks, inspiring other empaths to recognize their own patterns and begin their own awakening process. Jung realized he was documenting not just individual transformations, but the birth of a social movement. The awakened empath becomes living proof that you don't have to accept toxic treatment, that sensitivity is a superpower when used consciously, and that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates that let the right people in, while keeping the wrong people out. The new American empath evolution in action. Jung's final observations about awakened American empaths revealed something that changed psychology forever. These individuals hadn't become different people. They had become who they always were. Underneath years of conditioning and abuse, the transformation wasn't personality change, it was personality liberation. The awakened American empath represents what Jung called evolution in real time. They maintain all their original gifts, the deep empathy, the intuitive understanding, the ability to feel and process emotions at extraordinary levels. But now these gifts come with something they never had before: conscious choice. They can feel everything without being destroyed by it, see everything without being blinded by false hope, and love deeply without losing themselves in the process. Jung spent the final years of his career following these transformed individuals, documenting their long-term outcomes. What he discovered was consistently remarkable. Awakened empaths didn't just survive their transformations, they thrived at levels that seemed almost superhuman. Their businesses succeeded because they could read clients and markets with accuracy. Their relationships flourished because they attracted authentic people and repelled manipulators. Their life decisions became flawless because they trusted their intuitive intelligence completely. Most fascinating of all, these empaths developed what Jung termed selective empathy, the ability to turn their emotional receptivity on and off at will. They could be incredibly present and caring with people who deserved it, while remaining completely immune to manipulation from those who didn't. It was like they had developed emotional Wi-Fi. They could choose which networks to connect to and which to block entirely. The American empaths in Jung's studies showed a particular pattern of what he called strategic kindness. Growing up in a culture that often equates niceness with weakness, they learned to be kind in ways that enhanced rather than depleted them. They became generous with deserving people while being absolutely ruthless about protecting their energy. From vampires, Jung observed that these individuals began changing American social dynamics wherever they went. In a culture built on hierarchy, competition, and exploitation of the sensitive, the awakened empath becomes a system glitch that forces healthier interactions. They can't be manipulated, intimidated, or controlled, which means toxic people have to either evolve or reveal their true nature. The most beautiful discovery was how these empaths used their transformation to help others. Jung documented case after case of awakened empaths who became informal counselors, mentors, and guides for other sensitive people. They shared their stories, not for attention or sympathy, but as roadmaps for others who were ready to transform. They developed what Jung called empath underground networks, informal support systems that helped other sensitive people recognize manipulation, develop boundaries, and trust their own perceptions. These networks operated below the radar of mainstream psychology, creating a grassroots mental health revolution led by people who had learned to heal themselves. Jung's final insight about these transformed empaths was prophetic. They represent the future of human psychological development in a world becoming increasingly aware of mental health, emotional intelligence, and the costs of toxic relationships. The awakened empath becomes a template for healthy human functioning. They prove that you can be kind without being weak, loving without being exploited, and sensitive without being victimized. They demonstrate that the American dream of individual empowerment doesn't require stepping on others. It requires refusing to be stepped on while lifting up those who deserve support. The awakened American empath embodies a new kind of strength, power that protects rather than dominates, intelligence that heals rather than harms, and love that includes healthy boundaries. They become living proof that evolution isn't just biological, it's psychological, and it's happening right now in therapy offices, suburban homes, and corporate boardrooms across America. Jung's research left us with one final truth. Every empath will face their transformation moment. The only question is whether they'll embrace it consciously or let life force it upon them. The awakened empath chooses conscious evolution, and, in doing so, changes not just themselves but everyone around them. The empath revolution has begun. Are you ready to join it?